My name is Jody Elkins. I am the president of the Americas region of Insentra. Yeah, so Predictive Insights and Analytics is, at a high level, a managed service that actually fills the gap that is left by monitoring tools. At a deeper level, we have to talk about the actual challenge that organizations are trying to solve. And what they're looking to do is ultimately improve the end user experience. Even if they don't understand it in those terms or phrase it that way, at the end of the day, they're trying to deliver a solid service and a predictable, consistent service to their users. The way in which that happens, though, can be quite complex and often isn't understood in those terms. And what I mean by that is, when an IT organization is looking to improve or be able to have more insight, the natural selection or thought process is to buy a monitoring tool. I need to understand what's happening, so I need to collect data. But what's really the challenge that they're facing is not addressed by the tool. A tool is just a tool, and so our service, Predictive Insights and Analytics, takes that data, analyzes that data, correlates that data, and that's really what creates the solution or the outcome that is desired, which is an improved and consistently maintained end-user experience. Yeah, so I get a question a lot from customers that they've already bought a monitoring tool. Why do they need a managed services to help that? And the answer to that is quite simple. If I draw an analogy, I'm not a mechanic. And if I buy an old car that my intention is to fix up, rebuild the engine or rebuild the car itself from the ground up, I don't have the expertise necessarily, all of the expertise that I need to do that. And so if I was to go out and buy an awesome set of tools, and my favorite thought process around that is actually the movie Fast Times at Ridgemont High. If you remember, Jeff Spicoli crashes a car and really wrecks it badly. And he gets out and he says, that's okay, my dad's a TV repairman. He's got an awesome set of tools. We can fix this. Well, having the tools doesn't actually allow you to fix the car. You've got to have the expertise. Now, I could learn what I need to learn in order to use those tools to fix the car and rebuild the car, but I don't have that kind of time unless I'm unemployed or retired. And that's a really good analogy for monitoring tools. If you buy a tool, that's the first step. You need to actually collect data. But to actually achieve the outcome you need, you actually have to correlate that data, analyze that data, understand it in terms of actions. In other words, what do we have to do in order to improve that experience? And that's the gap that monitoring tools create. So without a managed service or a lot of resources and skills internally to do that function, that manual function, you don't actually get the outcome. Yeah, so end user experience is a term that's been thrown around for a long time. It's pretty self-explanatory and self-evident. However, at a high level, it is IT systems don't exist for the sake of themselves, right? IT systems are there in order to facilitate productivity of the users. You can't do, in most industries today, you can't do your job without some set of technology. So the end user experience is actually looking at technology from the perspective of an end user. How do I access my applications and my systems? How is that performing? Am I able to do my job effectively? And are there ways to improve my level of productivity so I can do my job even more effectively using the tools I have? That's end user experience. And I think most everybody understands that. I think that what becomes difficult here, though, is actually managing that end user experience. And I think a lot of organizations, number one, struggle with it because of some of the things I was talking about earlier with regards to skills, time, resources, all being challenges that every IT organization I've ever seen are challenged with constantly. But correlating that data and understanding how the users are actually interacting with applications and their desktops and other devices is really critical to understanding how productive they are using those systems. So I'll give you an example. One of the ways in which we manage user productivity and the end user experience is, let's say for instance, a user in a particular application that they use all day, every day in order to do their job. There may be a function within that application that typically takes about 8 seconds to perform. So when they get to the point, they click a button, and that function typically takes about 8 seconds, and that's normal, that's acceptable, that allows them to be very productive. But the user also knows that if there's a problem and that takes longer, let's say it gets to 11 seconds or 12 seconds, and we know that that is going to cause some level of frustration for the user. At the end of the day, though, it's making them less productive. If we understand that, we'll set SLAs at, let's say, 9.5 seconds. So we'll be watching that specific function all automatically. And when that function gets to 9.5 seconds, well before the 11 or 12 seconds we know is going to cause frustration and really degrade productivity, we'll then set an alert for ourselves, investigate why that's happening, test it on a regular basis, identify root cause, and then do one of two things. Inform the customer, here's specifically why that's happening, and here's specifically what you need to do to fix that. Or conversely, they can ask us to actually fix that for them. So that's where you start really proactively managing end-user experience. And by getting into that level of detail, you can actually start predicting when those things are going to happen. So that's a proactive way to actually manage end-user experience, as opposed to what most IT organizations are forced to do, not because they want to, but they're forced to be reactive. And a customer will have a problem, they'll get to that 12, 13, 14 seconds, and then they'll call the help desk, be very, very frustrated, and now it puts help desk, IT, and the IT organization, and the network administrators, and the systems administrators all on the back foot, reacting to a bad experience. And at the end of the day, what's often lost in that transaction is that the user, and usually more than one, are impacted from a productivity perspective, and that has a direct impact on the bottom line of the business. Yeah, so the service provides a number of things. In addition to the end user experience, we can actually help by mining that data and correlating that data. We can help organizations with capacity planning. A really good example of that is storage consumption, and I know a lot of IT directors and CIOs out there that on an annual basis they are spending budget on storage, whether that's cloud-based storage or on-premises storage, doesn't really matter, but they have a hard time predicting the usage, understanding the usage, storage consumption. They have a hard time predicting how that's going to change over the next 6 or 12 months, oftentimes because they don't have insight from the business as to what the business plans are. But more importantly, they really don't have typically a solid understanding of what the consumption trends have been. So one of the things that we can do with this is help them capacity plans. We can actually show over a period of time, in fact a long period of time if necessary, we can actually predict what their storage consumption is going to be based on certain parameters and help them capacity plan and budget, meaning that rather than buying 10 terabytes because they've got budget and they're not sure what they're going to use, if they could buy 5 terabytes today because that's what they know they're going to consume, and knowing that they'll likely need to buy another 5 terabytes, but that's going to take 13 or 14 months, then that budget allocation can be passed to the next year, and that can ultimately save an organization a hell of a lot of money. Yeah, so another benefit is real-time 24/7 monitoring. One of the things that we see in just about every organization that is focused on a monitoring tool or has purchased a monitoring tool is what most people will be familiar with, and it's called alert fatigue. When monitoring tools are implemented, they are primarily used as reactive tools. And there are so many things that can be monitored. And out of the box, an effective monitoring tool is going to be looking at literally hundreds, if not thousands, of criteria. And each one of those might create an alert. So you have two choices as an organization. You can really assign resources and significant amounts of time to understanding the tools, understanding all of those alerts, and setting each one of those alerts very effectively so that you don't get hit with hundreds, if not thousands, of alerts on a daily basis. The challenge with that, the danger in getting alert fatigue, is that important alerts are lost in the mix. If there's 10 important or critical alerts amongst 150, the likelihood of a system administrator or a help desk or an individual seeing that, being able to pull that out, is very low. And at the end of the day, it doesn't give you any value for the tool that you've purchased. So that's one of the areas that we focus on with Predictive Insights and Analytics is we'll actually manage all of those alerts for you. And we'll forward only those alerts that are absolutely critical to the end user experience or to the infrastructure itself. Yeah, at the end of the day, what that means for an organization, and particularly a director of IT or a systems administrator, if not the CIO, is that you can go to sleep at night and sleep well knowing that, number one, you're going to be very well aware when there's a critical alert on the system, and two, there's somebody watching your back. Yeah, another really massive advantage to the service is custom dashboards. And what I mean by that is any tool out there will come out of the box with a number of dashboards that will give you insight into literally anything from an infrastructure perspective. Typically what you see is CPU consumption, RAM utilization, IOPS, storage consumption, those types of things. But the problem with that is not everybody that is interested in understanding what's happening in the environment is, number one, technical, and number two, even if they are, they may not be concerned with those metrics. An engineer is going to be concerned with those metrics, but we can actually create custom Power BI dashboards that are accessible from any device securely, and we can create those dashboards with metrics that are meaningful to you. So for instance, a CIO or a CFO is likely going to be very, very interested in user productivity. So a dashboard can be created that identifies, let's say, two different regions of an organization. There's an LA office, a New York office, and maybe even a London location. What's the level of user productivity at any given moment between those three regions? Insert the word department for regions. It can differentiate different aspects of your organization and make comparisons around productivity. And we can even develop dashboards and have developed dashboards for some customers that show that over time. So in other words, what's the current level of productivity in these locations? And how does that compare to the productivity level yesterday? How does that compare to the productivity last week or last month or last year? So we can really create quick information gathering mechanisms through these Power BI dashboards for the different roles. A CIO wants to see something very different than a systems administrator. A director of IT maybe wants to see a combination of things, some technical metrics, some business level metrics. A CFO is going to be interested solely in productivity and perhaps security. But we can customize each one of those for what our customers actually want to be made aware of. Another massive advantage to the service is actually the output of the automated and manual effort of correlation, analysis and correlation of all the data that we gather. And that's really, from my perspective as a former CIO, a massive benefit of the service. It's one thing to have a set of data, but data without analysis and correlation, quite frankly, is useless. Data that has been analyzed and correlated into meaningful information is valuable, but not necessarily actionable on the part of an IT organization because they're constrained by time, resources, and skills oftentimes. So we take it one step further and we'll correlate and analyze that data, but we'll actually create specific actions. So on a monthly basis and ad hoc as necessary, we'll provide very specific recommendations that need to take place in order to improve an environment if it's not performing the way it should be, or maintain a really performant environment. And that becomes critical from an end user experience perspective. At the end of the day, users want and expect their applications to behave like dial tone. When you pick up a home phone, for those of you that have home phones still, you expect to hear dial tone. When you don't, it's frustrating. You're not able to make a call. In other words, you're not able to do your job if those systems don't work. And what that means at the end of the day is, particularly in centralized delivery application mechanisms like Citrix and others, what we often see is a productivity or performance peak and valley graph. If you were to look over a period of time, you will see sometimes it's performing very well, and you will see then dips or valleys in which performance and productivity drops. And that is a natural progression of any application or systems design that's not managed effectively on a daily basis. And what we see with all of our customers is that over time, that performance and productivity, number one, increases. And that line graph, if you think of it this way, becomes much more steady, and it eliminates peaks and valleys from a performance and productivity perspective. Yeah, other benefits, one of the most interesting ones for us was actually an unintended benefit. And a number of our customers have really taken advantage of the information that we provide with regards to user acceptance testing. So if you think about any type of migration, an application migration, a data center migration, a new build of a Citrix environment, a number of examples, it's very, very difficult to go through the process of that migration. And one of the most challenging aspects is user acceptance testing. And it starts in the very beginning, where you have to choose a CIO or a director that's responsible for these types of migrations has to choose their users that are going to test very, very carefully. Of course, the users have to understand the applications. Of course, they have to understand the systems. And of course, they have to understand exactly what it is they're going to test. Those are givens. But from a political perspective, large migration projects or important small migration projects that are important to the business can be very political. Meaning that if you choose the wrong user, and that user has a poor experience, and that user has a tendency to talk a lot, you can very quickly damage the IT organization's reputation. You can very quickly damage or put at risk the migration or the project itself, because you will meet more resistance. So one of the benefits the service actually provides is, what if you could actually know exactly what that user experience testing experience is going to be? In other words, in a typical Citrix migration, you know what the current desktop launch time is, and maybe that's 30 seconds, just as an example. You build a new environment, you want that desktop launch time to be shorter. You might know, because you've tested it yourself, that that's now 20 seconds, but what you might not know is getting into the guts of the application when you're running specific functions within that application. Is that better than the existing environment? Is it worse? Is it the same? So the question we started posing, or actually customers posed to us originally, was, what would it mean to me if I could understand exactly what that user test, that test user's experience is going to be with the application before I gave it to them? And that's quite powerful. And what we've seen a number of customers do as a result is reduce the amount of time that user acceptance testing takes by, I've seen it as high as 80%. On average, it's about 60%. Another benefit is objectively reporting on productivity. And productivity is an interesting thing, and it's an elusive challenge oftentimes in organizations. When you look at trying to understand what end-user experience is, we've talked about monitoring tools and gathering data and understanding what the infrastructure performance is. That's where we as technical people always go. IT always looks at infrastructure first. And don't get me wrong, it's absolutely the baseline. It's a requirement, and it's the foundation of the house. You have to be doing that. But understanding what user productivity actually looks like, there's two perspectives. There's a subjective perspective, and that's what we all hear on the help desk. We hear frustrated users. Help desk individuals don't often get calls from people that are really, really happy with the environment. They get calls from people that are frustrated, trying to do their job and their systems aren't working effectively. So we need to understand subjectively what those users' experience actually is, what they think it is. And we typically have a pretty good understanding of IT, of what that is. But we also need to understand objectively what productivity looks like. We need to be able to identify metrics and track metrics like application launch time, ICA latency, storage latency, network latency, desktop launch times, just to name a few. Those are things that absolutely have a direct impact on the end user experience and are, while dependent upon IT infrastructure, not exclusive to IT infrastructure. There could be multiple things outside the infrastructure that impact that. We need to understand that, track that, and then be able to identify root cause and identify the specific actions that are required to fix those challenges. And I think, of course, at the end of the day, one of the most important benefits is, while you increase productivity and improve and provide a consistently positive experience, the natural result of that, and we see this in all of our customers, is a reduction in help desk tickets. And that has a direct impact on the bottom line. It has a direct impact on IT's ability to focus on the right things, meaning that the business wants you to focus on helping the business grow, helping the business improve. The business doesn't get any value out of IT making sure the lights stay on. And by reducing those number of tickets, it really allows resources to be reallocated within an IT organization to focus on those important business concerns. Another benefit of the Predictive Insights and Analytics service is load and stress testing, and we do this automatically using a number of tools, and we go a little bit, quite a lot further than a lot of monitoring tools do or testing tools do. What I mean by that is we can automatically and regularly stress test an environment. So if you think about a hospital environment, change of shift, which often happens at 6 or 7 a.m. in the morning, you've got the night shift coming off, and you've got nurses, doctors, and other clinicians logging on. We're all familiar with boot storms. What we can do prior to that, just as an example, 2 hours prior to that shift change, we can actually run a stress test across the environment, and we'll know ahead of time where there's going to be issues. We can pull XenApp servers as an example out of commission, fix those before the boot storm, and actually predict those types of things, predict those challenges, and fix those challenges before the users actually go through the shift change. So that's load and stress testing. The other thing that we can do is continually and automatically test specific applications and even functions within those applications. I alluded earlier to how we manage end-user experience, and just another example of that is when we can automatically test the applications and actually test them in a way that looks and behaves exactly the way a user does manually, we can predict when challenges are going to arise that are going to impact the user, make those adjustments, so at the end of the day, we're predicting and fixing problems before the user even realizes that there's a challenge. There are also two things that I hear consistently from CIOs and that they're most concerned with, and especially these days. Number one, the obvious one, is security. The other one is end-user experience, and I've talked quite a bit about end-user experience. Let's talk about security just purely from a patching perspective. One of the most common ways for security to be breached is just by lack of patching systems. It's an issue that concerns just about every CIO. We had one of our customers came to us and said, hey, I just want to see on a dashboard at any given time what my patch status is. So one of the things we did for them is we understood what their baseline patch was. We prioritize, of course, we categorize all servers for all of our customers, like category 1, 2, and 3, category 1 being, for instance, the most critical servers to their business. And he wanted to see, in this case, all category 1 servers, how do they compare to the baseline patch status that they have created? And of course, that baseline patch status changes on a regular basis. So we created a very simple dashboard that showed a graph. And in this case, there were 68 category 1, in other words, critical servers. And we compared that compared each one of those servers' patch status to the baseline patch status. And at any given time, he could pull up the Power BI dashboard and see exactly how many servers, and if he wanted to, specifically what servers weren't meeting that baseline patch status. So at the end of the day, Predictive Insights and Analytics is a service that fills a gap that I've seen in my own life over the last 20 years. As a CIO, I bought a lot of monitoring tools. As a leader of a well-known VAR in the States, I sold a lot of monitoring tools. And now in my role at Insentra, and one of the reasons that Insentra got my attention initially was because of this type of service. This service fills a gap that has a direct impact to the IT organization from a political and functional perspective. It has a direct positive impact on the users because a user that can be more productive is obviously going to be much happier. And it has a direct impact on the business because if the IT organization, if the users are being productive, and IT can allocate and focus more resources on actually fulfilling business requirements, everyone wins, and all of that has a direct impact on the bottom line of the business. If you'd like more information on Predictive Insights and Analytics, you can email sales@insentragroup.com.